The best studio lighting I've ever seen in my life was achieved on January 25th, 2024. This is a documentation of that process. I set up on the pre-light day a very hard light. When I got home, I recreated the set in 3D and relit everything. When I was in the pre-light, I felt that I had just seen it so many times. I had done it so many times. It was the same technique that I had done. I wanted to try something different here. Reason number two, I needed really, really bright light. I had a person stand in. I asked them how uncomfortable it was because I knew it would be slightly uncomfortable. And they said it was a little bit uncomfortable. Between that and wanting to move to something a little bit different and kind of like push harder to create a new look, I got home and worked on it until I nailed it. This is a test shot from the Alexa 35, and this is kind of where we landed. I find that this is slightly in between hard light and soft light. We still have very bright areas and very dark areas, but there's no hard line shadow. And this is not fully graded. This is very new footage, so I'm just, quickly taking a look at it. But I just kind of like how it slightly breaks the rules. In today's world, advertising campaigns are blending the lines between produced and not produced, and brands will have a mix between iPhone stuff and actually produced stuff, but the actually produced stuff can't be too overly soft. It's clear we're in a studio vibe and more towards this looks a little more natural. The shirt that she's wearing, the way that her hair is, the minimal makeup, and imperfectly perfect, in my opinion, lighting is important to know how to do because it fits within advertising right now. TikTok went to having full screen. You don't rotate them, you just post them as normal. And then when you're looking at the feed, you can click full screen and you rotate your phone, kind of just like on YouTube. I feel that that is a good sign and that you can now create in the advertising and commercial world work that is not necessarily iPhone natural light in your bathroom, but you can create things that look good, that are shot traditionally, but you have a lighting design, I think, that matches something like this, where it just kind of looks cool and breaks a couple of the rules. So I'm gonna pop over to Set a Light. I've talked about this software before. This video is not sponsored by Satellite 3D. I did actually work with somebody else on this video, but I'll get into that in a second. But I love this software and think that it is extremely useful for anybody in an image making career. You can very rapidly test out different setups. I rebuilt the set that I was working in pretty closely, and you can use real lights that will match up with the actual lights in real life. Somebody asked me, have you ever tested this and done the same lighting setup in real life as what you did in the software? And my answer is that I do it all the time. It takes time to move a light around. If I had to move this camera to over here, it would take some time. In the software, you can just drag it around. It will match what you see in real life. So I just think that this software is incredible, and there is a link below. These are low res, not rendered, but I started working with hard light here, and we can see the changes that I've made and deciding, like, should I go dark background, light background? What should she be wearing? You can see I'm changing the side lights here, some foreground elements, and this is kind of where I started my approach. You can see still hard light in a different position. Even testing out how I want to frame things up here. This is all pre-shoot. This is kind of where I get into maybe we don't just do complete hard light. Maybe we have some panels here and have it look like somewhere between hard and soft, but I still went on to pre-light with hard light. I ended the 3D development right here, went to the studio, did the pre-light, had something similar set up to this, and then got home and switched over to something more like this. After a lot of iterations, I felt like this was in a different type of world. It felt soft and hard to me. It started with me having a light source off to the side, maybe 45-degree angle to the camera. I moved the key light towards the back wall in order to get the back wall to be lit exactly how I wanted it to be lit. And I have all of our measurements here. You can export all of these measurements, and then you see a little behind the scenes image here and the shot right here, and you can render out this whole entire frame right here and bring it to your shoot. We have our key light here, which is multiple lights shooting through diffusion, an 8x8, and I did end up using an 8x8. The background was feeling right to me. It might be kind of hard to see it right here, but there is a gradient from brighter to darker, similar to her face being brighter here and darker here. And this is not the final image that we landed on, but this is the image that I was like, oh yes, this is the approach I want to take when going back into the studio. The distance from the key light to the background is very crucial because let's just say we moved everything back, including the camera and the backlight. We just moved everything. I'll make it extreme, and then I'll make our background wider and taller. So this is not a fully rendered frame, but this software will live render. Like if I were to move something, you can see it renders out. And I'm just on a laptop right now, so the fact that this does this as quickly is great. She looks not in the same world as the background here, and that is due to the distance that all of this is from the background. And I could light the background, which is a typical thing that is done, and then I would reduce, let's say I'll go to 50% on these lights because they look too bright to me, and they would probably need to be higher. Let's just go to 80. This is another reason that I love this software and that you're absolutely missing out if you don't use it, because you can test out things so insanely rapidly. This will like change how you operate. But anyways, now we have a scene where the background is lit independently from the talent. So if I were to just solo these, we can see that the background light is not touching her at all. The light from here, while it is affecting the background, it's not getting it enough where it looks real. I felt when I was late night doing these tests that this also didn't look right. If she was delivering a message to camera and it needed to be super traditional in the lighting, maybe something like this would work. Maybe I would reduce the lights a little bit, but I'm gonna go back to what we had before. You know when you're in a greenhouse and the ceilings and walls are kind of like frosted and it feels like you're in a different world? Something about when I saw this, it felt like I was in another world that had like a slightly different atmosphere than we live in, and it still looked like natural, but natural from a different world. So I moved on to actually removing the bounce, which we can see here, and I actually moved the bounce just further away a little bit. So we can see in this shot, the bounce is right here, and in this shot, the bounce is a little bit further away. So we can see this shot here, and we can see our shot right here. Similar vibes here. This is actually extremely close now that I'm looking at it. Then we changed the wardrobe and kind of tweaked out, do we want to see the edges of the seamless? And this is where, as you can see, I 3-starred it. This is where I landed, and the original shot here, you can see the edges a little bit. So we have a little bit of edges here and a little bit of the edges here. And this is just a test shot, but I shot this project on film and was a little more dynamic than just this, and it just looks absolutely incredible. I have a bunch of behind the scenes from this in the last video that I posted titled BTS. That was the first time that I've ever like posted a behind the scenes video like that, and it's kind of just like a cool vibe. And the music in there is from audio. I've been using audio for the past, 6 months or so. I get comments and DMs all the time asking for what music is in the videos. And my current favorite feature that they have is called Link Match AI, where you can post a link to a song from Spotify or YouTube and like a couple others, and it will return music from their library that matches the vibe of the song that you linked. In the last video that I did, I completely utilized Link Match AI and found the music very quickly. So it's interesting for me because I have multiple playlists on YouTube and in Spotify that are for different commercial projects, my reel, movie scores. I've spent years developing those playlists and adding music to them. When I go to audio, I can quickly go to those playlists that I'm so familiar with, grab one of those songs, take the link, pop it in there, and then find a bunch of tracks that have a similar vibe that I can use in a YouTube video or in any commercial project or short film or movie or whatever. That is cool. And if you need music, you should check them out because they are great and continuously getting even better. And the feature like Link Match AI is incredible and saves so much time. The behind the scenes video, you can see all of this stuff of what I'm talking about. We shot on film, which was awesome, and I've been looking at the footage for the past couple days. We shot on multiple different stocks, including Ektachrome. I'm going to be posting a bunch of stuff about all of that. This is just like the first look at what the lighting actually looked like. And then when we get dynamic with the camera, we had shots on Steadicam and shots with an LED wall and shots with the Model K moving around, and everything just looks so good that I wanted to document this so that I don't forget it, so that you could benefit from it. The fact that it matches up so nicely with this, we can see kind of the same exact shot here. I love it. In this particular scenario, I used 3 S60s through 8x8 bleached muslin, and I had an S30 in the back. In the software, I can put barn doors so that it's not hitting the background. And if it's hitting the background a little bit, at least when setting things up in the software like this, I don't mind so much because these lights will overpower it anyway. You can see if I turn it off, it's not really hitting the background too much. But on set, I'll try to find the BTS of this, but on set, I just put like a small flag in between the light and the background to block that off from the background. And we can see that this blocks off the light from the background a lot, and this is, pre-render, but still hits her, blocks it off from the background. And when I move this, I have it set to be locked on her, so I can see this light blocker is kind of blocking off the back. If we didn't have it, we could see that the light is lighting the back. The reason for that light was to have it be on her and not on the background. It's kind of just all light from one side. Kind of how things would happen naturally. Like if you're outside, light is coming from kind of one direction, it bounces around a little bit. I wouldn't put the backlight in this scenario on the other side because that just kind of doesn't make sense. So all the light is coming from the same spot, and we have a nice looking shot, and I just want to show what it looks like without the backlight, and we can kind of see it really makes everything come together. And then you can play with your bounce. Like we could get a bounce right in here, pull it a little forward, right out of frame, maybe rotate it towards her. So now we have less of a contrast ratio on her face. I liked the no bounce look on set. There's a lot more in the log image, and we could kind of have a look here. This is F1A, long time in the making. I have a node before this where we can reduce the contrast, maybe brighten it up a little bit, maybe add a little more. So we can reduce that ratio a little bit so we can still see details there, but I do like this scenario that we see right here. You can take this setup right here and very easily tweak it. You could change the color of this light, for example. I mean, this looks cool. Now that I'm looking at this, maybe I should have tried something like this where it's a little more cyan light in the back. I hope the sound of him licking my hand is not too prevalent in this, but I do think that this can work for a lot of studio work. I can take something like this and even implement it into other scenarios, kind of where I am right now. I don't have an 8x8 here with 3 sky panels and then a 4th sky panel behind me, but I do have a light bouncing into just one of those circular reflectors. Here, I'll take a photo. And it's a similar type of thing, kind of. Like if I'm looking here, the light is coming from the side. I'm missing the backlight and it's a little bit smaller, but I'm in here with kind of a similar setup at home to what I did in a big studio. So it works, and being able to practice and mess around in the software is something that saved this shoot, in my opinion. And I absolutely love it. It kind of goes to show every time that I set up or go with my initial plan for something and then think about it, and if I'm really not feeling that it's right, push forward into improving it and getting it right, I always really like the results. So you don't always have to stop at version 1. You can keep pushing forward, and especially with lighting, being able to rapidly move things around in a software like this. How long would it have taken me to do all these setups? That's like multiple days. We have the resources to be able to say, I don't absolutely love where I am right now. I don't absolutely love version 1. Let me totally scrap it, take notes on whatever it was in case I need to go back to it, and try something new? Why do I want to try something new? What's the reason? What's the reason for light that kind of looks like hard light and kind of looks like soft light? My reason is for something that felt new and that felt natural in the studio and that like fits with what people might respond to in today's world. My original approach did not necessarily have a significant reason why. My approach that I landed on was I want to make something that feels this way that's in my mind. Some were logistical reasons, like not wanting to be too bright in the model's face for a full day. And the other reason was to try to create an environment that feels real and almost that we just stepped into it, because that fit with what the styling and hair and makeup notes for the talent was. You just popped into the studio. We didn't hire you to do this. I always say it's Saturday morning. This was on a Wednesday or Thursday, but I always say, just feel like it's a Saturday morning. That's what I was saying during the shoot. It's Saturday morning. It's Saturday morning. You're just chilling. That is the vibe that I was going after. So the light kind of reflected that, like we were in a real life scenario, but something that just looked bold and looked cool and like broke a few rules on purpose and resulted in images that I think are absolutely incredible. So within all of this were certain specs that I wanted to be able to hit on the camera, which is important to know beforehand that you can hit those specs, aka your ISO, shutter in frames per second, and your lens stop. A 135 millimeter lens, for example, when you're framed up like this on somebody, I don't necessarily want to shoot that at a T1.3 because I want their eyes and their ears to be in focus. Some of these shots we shot on Ektachrome, which is a 100 ASA film stock, equivalent to a 100 ISO. A 5.6 at an ISO 100 is a lot darker than where you might typically be at like an 800 at a 2.8. You need a lot more light than that. Testing out all of this to make sure that we have enough light is like half of the process when you're being specific about your lens stop and your ISO. Ektachrome, it's 100. There's not like an Ektachrome 800. It's just 100. So setting everything up in 3D or using like photometrics. I made a video about this software and I made a video about photometrics app from ARRI and photometrics in Situs Link. So you have all the aperture lights and all of the ARRI lights in the two different softwares, two different applications where you can say, like this is a Amaran 300C right here. You can plug in your camera and say, I want to be at a 5.6 at ISO 100. How far away does that light need to be to get me to that exposure, which is completely outlined in a video I made. I think it's called Photometrics. Half of this, create the look. The other half, make sure that the lights that you have can give you enough exposure for that look. And once you start moving into, I want to shoot in an 8, like for product photography, you want to be around an 8 or 11 at a low ISO, so you need tons of light. Then you bring in robots where you're shooting at 120, 100 frames a second. Then you need tons and tons and tons of light. All of this preparation is to be able to make sure that we can hit the specs that I wanted and that there's enough light for it and that the look of the light is in the right world that I want to be in. And then you can either match what you have in here exactly in the software, or you can tweak it a little bit on set. It influences your lighting list or lets you know if the lights that you have already on your list will be enough. I think that learning the rules and then breaking the rules is an important thing to do. The first studio shoot I did was in like a 10 by 10 office, like 12 years ago. It was just like a square office and I think we used a Joker with like a 6-foot softbox on it. And the model was kind of like 1 foot off the back wall. And it actually ended up looking great. And that kind of always stuck with me, like the light lit the background. And then there was a time in my life where I lit the background separately, which is more of like a high-end, crispy look, more exact. And then now I'm moving back to the light that's lighting the model is also lighting the background, which works well for shots that are like waist up. Full body is a whole nother story and a little bit harder because then you see the shadow by their feet. Another thing that I do like now, which I feel like Bradford Young comments on this a lot, I like each light to do what I want it to do, and oftentimes not any more than that. So for this light right here, I'm considering this a light. I have 3 here kind of acting as one, and you can even see in the BTS that they were set up like just like this. Let's just consider this being one light. I want this light to light her right here. I don't want it to light her over here unless I work with a bounce, which in that case would be another light source. Being in a large studio with black walls, cement floor, black ceilings, not letting the light bounce around. In this shot right here, for example, there's light on my face right here. There's no lights on over here, but there's white walls. There's a white wall right here. There's a cabinet right here. So light is bouncing all around the room and back at me. If you're in a small scenario, I would use V-flats or floppies or black flags or duvetine, or I have like a jacket hanging right there so that this light doesn't hit this wall too much. I have, as we can see here, purposefully not put the the set paper on the floor. And you can see that I didn't even let that paper touch the floor to reduce any bouncing up at the talent so that I could just really see what each light was doing. And the walls were far enough apart and black that I didn't need to worry about bounce that I didn't want. We have the backlight here not bouncing off of white to illuminate her so that we could just really dial things in. If I needed bounce on her to match stills that were being taken, to match the look of a campaign that is required, or for whatever other reason, I could dial in how much white would be on the ground. So for example, I am going to take a still of this and then bring this white onto the floor. And let's just even make it wider. With a cyc, it's pretty much to the ceiling. This more represents a cyc. So if I was in this scenario, I would black out the floor, but we'll see what these two images look like. So I'll actually render these. And while this renders, this is Mason. Say what's up, buddy. He needs a haircut. The groomer said they wouldn't cut him until he's 6 months, but they would cut just the face, which we need to get done because I don't know how he sees. Apart from the sides here, we can see there is a little bit of a difference here with her face being more illuminated, and we can see the cyc in her eyes. Having this just covering the back so that it's not doing anything that I don't want it to do is also important to me. And again, this is just one way, and this specific way yielded very nice results for me. All right, that's all I got for now. Peace.